Welcome to the deep dive. If you looked at the European project back, say, in the early 1980s, you'd see this grand idea, but one that felt like it was seriously stuck.
Yeah, it was kind of grinding to a halt, wasn't it? For decades, really, the European Economic Community, the EEC, was still feeling the effects of a major crisis from the 60s.
Ah, the empty chair crisis.
Exactly. And the result of that was the Luxembourg Compromise in '66.
Which sounds quite diplomatic, but...
But it was effectively a break, a huge one. It basically said any single member state could demand unanimous agreement if they felt their very important interests were involved.
Meaning a national veto.
Precisely, a veto. Now, imagine trying to agree on, I don't know, thousands of detailed rules needed for a truly common market safety standards, professional qualifications, things like that.
It just one country could stop the whole process.
You see the problem. Integration just stalled. It was paralysis.
And that paralysis is exactly why we're focusing today on two huge moments, two really pivotal treaties.
Yep.
The Single European Act, or SEA, from 1986, and then the Maastricht Treaty from 1992.
That's our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
To unpack how these two treaties fundamentally shifted things, how they moved Europe from just sort of economic cooperation towards a real political union. We'll stick just to these two.
Okay, let's dive in. Part 1. The Single European Act, 1986. The big goal here was completing the internal market, right? Sometimes called the common market or a single market.
Yes, that idea had been around since the start, but the SNDA actually put a deadline on it, a hard deadline.
December 31st, 1992. That date became iconic.
It really did. It focused minds. But like you said, having a deadline is one thing. Actually meeting it, given the veto problem, that needed some serious institutional changes.
So how did they fix the veto issue? How did they make the 1992 deadline achievable?
Well, this was the big gamble. They introduced qualified majority voting QMV for the Council of Ministers, but crucially, only in specific, carefully defined areas.
Mostly areas needed for the single market.
Exactly. Areas related to harmonizing rules. Think product standards, health and safety. The nuts and bolts required to make that free movement of goods and services actually work.
But QMV, that's a huge deal. It means countries agreed they could be outvoted on things they previously held a veto over.
Yeah.
That's a significant surrender of sovereignty, isn't it?
It absolutely was. And it wasn't easy. But the argument was essentially pragmatic. If you want the massive economic benefits of a functioning single market, you need a more efficient way to make the rules for it.
So the economic prize justified the political risk of losing the veto sometimes.
That was the calculation. Without QMV, they'd never have managed to pass the sheer volume of legislation needed by the 1992 deadline. It just wouldn't have happened.
So the SEA was quite technical in a way. It provided the legislative tool QMV to get the job done, but it wasn't only about the Council, was it? What about the European Parliament? It wasn't exactly powerful before this.
No, it was often called a talking shop. The SEA gave it a real boost. It introduced the cooperation procedure.
Cooperation procedure. What did that mean in practice?
It meant that for certain laws, again, particularly linked to the single market, the Parliament didn't just give an opinion anymore. It could actually propose amendments. And the Council had to take those seriously. It could even reject a proposal under certain conditions.
So a first real taste of legislative power for the EP.
A definite step up. It increased democratic oversight as the community started doing more. And the SEA also formally recognized the European Council, the meetings of heads of state or government, giving it a treaty basis.
And the EEC also started doing more kinds of things, right? New areas of responsibility.
That's another key part of the EA. It expanded the EEC's formal powers, its competences. Suddenly you see things like environmental protection explicitly mentioned, and also scientific research and technological development.
So broadening out from just the economy?
Yeah.
Yes, a sign of things to come. And interestingly, it's in that environmental section of the SEA that we see the first mention of the principle of subsidiarity, the idea that decisions should be taken as closely as possible to the citizen, though it wasn't fully defined until later.
Okay, so a quick memory aid for the SEA. Think SEA equals market unity. It set that crucial 1992 deadline for the single market and brought in QMV to make it possible. The technical fix, essentially.
That's a good way to put it.
Laying the groundwork.
Right, let's move forward then. From the technical groundwork of the SEA in '86 to the much more politically ambitious Maastricht Treaty in 1992, the single market project, thanks largely to QMV, was actually happening. It created this momentum.
Huge momentum. The question naturally became, what next? We've got this integrated market, now what?
And Maastricht's answer was, well, it was a massive political leap, wasn't it? A shift in identity.
Definitely. This is the moment the European Economic Community formally becomes the European Union, EU. Just dropping economic from the name was a huge symbolic statement, signaling that this wasn't just about trade anymore.
Exactly. It was now officially about things like foreign policy, security, justice, policing, much broader political cooperation. Maastricht marks the birth of the EU as we kind of understand it today.
And it came with this rather famous or maybe infamous structure, the three pillars. Why three? Why not just fold everything into the old EEC structure?
Ah, the pillars. Well, that was pure political necessity, a compromise. Member states, especially countries like the UK and Denmark, were wary of giving up too much control in really sensitive areas like foreign policy or policing.
So the pillars were a way to handle different areas differently.
Precisely. Pillar 1 was essentially the old EEC, renamed the European Community, EC. This is where the community method reigned.
Community method
Meaning supranational. Strong institutions like the Commission and the European Court of Justice, lots of QMV in the Council, legally binding decisions, strong judicial oversight. This pillar contained all the core economic stuff. The single market.
and something incredibly ambitious, the Plan for Economic and Monetary Union, the EMU.
Yes, EMU. The roadmap towards a single currency. This was housed in Pillar 1 because it required that strong, binding community method.
We have to pause on EMU. If the single market was ambitious, planning for a single currency, that's taking down a core symbol of national sovereignty.
It was monumental. Think about it. Giving up your national currency, your control over interest rates, exchange rates, it meant tying your economic fate irrevocably to your neighbors. It's arguably the deepest form of integration achieved. That's why it was central to Maastricht's ambition.
Okay, so Pillar 1,
Yeah.
the supranational engine, community method, EMU. What about the other two pillars?
Pillars 2 and 3 were different beasts. They used the intergovernmental method.
Intergovernmental, meaning governments stay firmly in charge.
Exactly. Pillar 2 was the Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP. Pillar 3 covered Justice and Home Affairs, JHA, things like police cooperation, fighting crime, asylum, immigration policy.
Sensitive stuff.
Highly sensitive. So in these pillars, decisions were mostly taken by unanimity. The national veto remained powerful here. The roles of the Commission, the Parliament, and especially the Court of Justice were much weaker compared to Pillar 1.
So it was like having different rule books for different policy areas within the same EU house.
That's a good analogy. It allowed integration to deepen overall, but let member states keep tighter control over foreign policy and internal security matters.
And Maastricht didn't just reshape how governments work together. It did something quite profound for individuals, too, introducing union citizenship.
Yes, a really important innovation. For the first time, it created a direct legal link between the citizen and the European Union itself, alongside their national citizenship.
And this wasn't just symbolic, right? It had practical consequence.
Oh, absolutely. It enshrined rights like the freedom to move and reside anywhere within the Union. Imagine, no more needing special permits just to live or work in another member state. That became a fundamental right. It also gave you the right to vote and stand as a candidate in local and European Parliament elections where you lived, even if you weren't a citizen of that country.
So making the union feel more tangible for ordinary people.
That was the idea. And alongside empowering citizens, Maastricht also significantly empowered the European Parliament. Remember the cooperation procedure from the SEA?
Yes, the first step up.
Well, Maastricht introduced the co-decision procedure. This was a game changer.
How so?
It basically put the Parliament on an almost equal footing with the Council for making laws in many areas covered by Pillar 1. The Parliament could now genuinely block legislation it didn't like. It became a true co-legislator. This procedure, by the way, is now what we call the ordinary legislative procedure.
So a much stronger democratic element. And they also added an ombudsman.
That's right, the European Ombudsman. To give people and businesses a way to complain about maladministration, bad practice by the EU institutions themselves. Another layer of accountability.
And finally, Maastricht also tried to set some ground rules, some limits on how this more powerful EU would actually use its powers, didn't it?
Yes, crucially, it formally wrote down the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality.
Subsidiarity, we heard that mentioned with the SEA. How did Maastricht define it?
Maastricht stated clearly that in areas where the EU doesn't have exclusive power, it should only act if the objectives can't be achieved sufficiently by the member states themselves, either at national, regional, or local level. Basically, the EU should only step in if it can do the job better.
A kind of less is more principle, unless EU action is clearly needed.
Sort of. It's meant to ensure decisions are taken as close to the citizen as possible and to reassure states that the EU wouldn't just grab power unnecessarily. The treaty also explicitly said the EU respects the national identities of its member states and their fundamental rights, balancing integration with national character.
Okay, another memory aid. Maastricht, EU identity. This is where the European Union is born, with the three pillars, the big EMU project, union citizenship, and the principle of subsidiarity.
That captures it well. The political completion, you could say, of the economic project turbocharged by the SEA.
So looking back at these two treaties together,
Yeah.
the SEA first provided the tools, didn't it? The QMV, the deadline, making the single market a reality.
Yes, it built the necessary economic foundation, the legislative machinery.
And then Maastricht built on that. It created the political house, the European Union, with that complex three-pillar structure to manage new areas. And it created an EU identity through things like union citizenship and the hugely ambitious EMU.
It was an incredibly rapid transformation in just 6 years, from 1986 to 1992. A real acceleration from an economic community towards something aiming for shared political destiny.
Which brings us to a final thought. You mentioned EMU, the Economic and Monetary Union, as maybe the most ambitious part of Maastricht. This commitment to a shared economic future, potentially a single currency.
It really was a profound step in sharing sovereignty, perhaps the most profound.
So the question that leaves us with is this. Given how deeply EMU intertwine national economies, how much further can political integration actually go before it starts to seriously challenge that very notion of distinct national identity that Maastricht also promised to protect?
That's the tightrope Europe has been walking ever since, isn't it? Balancing deeper integration with national sovereignty, it's the core tension. And it all really crystallized in those crucial years between the SEA and Maastricht.